Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Badlands Media Live. I'm your host, Gordon McCormick. This morning, we are anticipating the meeting between Trump and Erdoğan at the White House. It's scheduled to begin at 11:30. Don't know if it will actually start at 11:30, but I wanted to jump on a few minutes early and provide a little bit of commentary for those who are interested. And then, maybe I'll do some post-game commentary. I certainly will do some post-game commentary based on what actually happens. But I think this is going to be an important meeting. I don't know if I'm right or not. This could be a nothing burger. But given the timing and all the things that I want to run through, I'm thinking that this will be a big deal. So let me pull up a few things that I thought I had pulled up, but I don't. So just bear with me, and we got a little bit of time, so we'll take our time here. The first is, so how do we get here? What is this meeting about, and why did it come to fruition? Again, this is speculation on my part, so we don't have an official narrative, but I'm just piecing together what I've seen. It all began with Netanyahu last week announcing a meeting at the White House. And basically, I think the actual announcement was that he was invited to the White House. Announces invited to the White House. This was when Trump, I think, was I'm trying to find the earliest article. Here's one from Times of Israel. And this is probably pretty reliable in terms of being early. So this is from September 16th. And so we're talking about last Tuesday. And Trump was at the time in a he was in Britain meeting with Keir Starmer. You remember that whole thing where he did the thing with the Queen, or not the Queen, King Charles. He was there for several days. So Trump is in the United Kingdom while all this is happening. Netanyahu gives this press conference where he's talking about the Israeli economy. He's trying to dispel rumors, what he calls, propaganda, anti-Israel propaganda, anti-Semitic propaganda. Let me pull up. I have a clip from that actually, which I think is relevant since we have some time here. And what he says in this clip is he's talking about how the world is basically talking about putting sanctions on him. The European Union, which has always been an ally of Israel, the European continent has always been an ally of Israel. Of course, the United Kingdom and France both together created the nation of Israel. They actually drew all the lines for the entire Middle East in 1917, 1919 at the end of World War II. But as part of the Balfour Declaration, which was a letter written by Sir Arthur Balfour of the House of Nobles, the aristocracy of Britain, to the Rothschilds, to Sir Walter Rothschild in 1917, promising that they were going to deliver a secular state, a secular nation to the Jewish people in the Holy Land. That was basically codified into law, I guess you'd say, for lack of a better word, made official in, I think it was 1926. And so because 1917, the Middle East didn't exist. It was the Ottoman Empire. We were fighting World War I. The Ottoman Empire controlled most of the Middle East and had for 700 years. And then, of course, we defeated the Ottoman Empire, who were allied with Germany in World War I. And Britain went about carving up the Middle East under the Picot-Sykes Agreement. Picot-Sykes Agreement was a pseudo-secret, kind of a secret negotiation between Mark Sykes, who was a British industrialist, and his first name escapes me, but Picot was a French industrialist. And they basically made a deal that the French elites and the British elites were going to control the Middle East, mostly for the oil, because you have to remember that in World War One, the battleship was the premier weapon. That was the great weapon system of World War One was the battleship. In World War II, the premier weapon system was the aircraft carrier, and which effectively made the battleship obsolete, because battleships could be bombed very easily by aircraft, and the aircraft could launch from an aircraft carrier far before the aircraft carrier would be in range of the battleship. And that's why at Pearl Harbor, the people on the inside of the government who knew Pearl Harbor was going to happen, they didn't mind all those battleships. Remember what was bombed in World War II at Pearl Harbor. It was Battleship Row at Pearl Harbor. So they didn't mind all those battleships being destroyed, because they were probably going to scrap them all anyway. They were obsolete technology that would not do well against the Japanese Navy, which had 4 or 5 aircraft carriers, at least. And so, again, getting back to the point, Pico and Sykes make this agreement to carve up the Middle East. Let's pull up the map. Might as well just walk you through the whole arithmetic of it. Waiting for this to load. And so the maps I want to show you here that are relevant, and I'm sure some of you who've been following my stuff these are going to look very familiar, but it's these oil maps, which are right here. Okay, so like this map right here is from 1952. Okay, so this is after Israel. The modern nation of Israel is formally created by the UN Partition Plan of 1947. Before that, it was called the Mandate of Palestine. And so, just real quick, what happens to the Pico-Sykes Agreement is Syria and Lebanon become the French protectorates. Israel, or at the time it was called Mandate Palestine. The whole thing was just one country, Mandate Palestine, the British Mandate Palestine. Jordan, at the time it's called Transjordan, and Iraq are the 3 protectorates under Britain. Now, France was not in the Middle East in World War I. It was only Britain in the Middle East. But the reason they bring France in is because they want to keep Russia out. Russia and Britain were allies in World War I, but they have long been enemies. And the British understood that the Russians were not their friends, and they didn't view them as friends. And they did not want the Russians coming in and getting the oil. So getting back to the battleship thing, the reason why they wanted the oil is they needed lifeblood for their battleship fleets. And and they understood that oil was just the future of the Industrial Revolution. So the reason they carve it up this way, if you look at the maps, like Jordan is a very goofy shape, but after I saw this map a few years ago, it suddenly made sense. Here are where the big oil fields that were discovered are located in Iraq. You can see here's Iraq. Here will gives you this is just Iraq, but you can see the biggest one is Kirkuk, and anyone who served in the Middle East probably is familiar with Kirkuk, and will tell you about how important that is as an oil field. It's an enormous, super giant oil field, and that was one of the big taps. But then there are several other ones. A lot of this oil is getting sent down to Basra and shipped out through the Persian Gulf, but most of it is going across these pipelines and terminating either at Banais or Tripoli, which are both in Lebanon, or they're terminating in Haifa, which at the time, again, is Mandate Palestine, not Israel yet. So Haifa is controlled by the British. Tripoli and Banais are controlled by the French, but the French and the British are at this point, even though they were historical enemies, they are basically working lock and step at this point. But you can understand why Transjordan is shaped this way, because it was all about the pipelines. It was all about getting the pipelines across Iraq. You can even see why Iraq is shaped this way, right? So the reason I'm telling you the story is because this explains why the lines in the Middle East are drawn the way they're drawn. And excuse me, I'm sorry. Tripoli is in Lebanon. Banias is in Banias, I think is how you say it, is in Syria. So one of them is in Syria, one of them is in Lebanon, but both of these are protectorates of France. So they're both French ports. So again, France has two ports that they're shipping oil out of with refineries there, and then the British have one at Haifa. Now, once they create 1947, once they formally do the UN partition plan and the Nakba occurs, which is Arabic for the catastrophe, the Arabs destroy this pipeline. So this pipeline is when this map is drawn, this pipeline is no longer in use. And this enormous oil field here in Jordan isn't even discovered. I think it looks like it's discovered in 1952, but it wasn't discovered initially. And to this day, Jordan is not allowed to have their own domestic oil industry, which is insane. But look at that enormous oil field, and they're not allowed to pump that. So anyway, getting back to the story, that's when we got control of the oil. The idea that we took control of the oil after 9/11 is a lie. There was disputes with Saddam Hussein, but for the most part, that it wasn't really about the oil. It was about pipelines running through the Middle East. It was about toppling troublesome governments that weren't that were seen as obstacles to long-term plans. And it was about the opium in Afghanistan. All of those things had nothing to do with 9/11. Okay, so getting back to today, what's happening today, Netanyahu holds this press conference. So it's significant that the Europeans are cutting out Israel. That they're all saying we're gonna end our free trade agreements. The European Union is saying we're gonna end our free trade agreements with Israel. We're gonna tariff them, and in some cases we may just sanction them and stop doing trade with them in certain products. A lot of the European countries are saying they're going to stop shipping arms to them because they've been shipping arms to them for the past 75 years. All of this is very significant. It's a big deviation from the norm. And the reason it's a big deal for Israel is because Israel does not really have any natural resources. There's no natural resources in this part of the Middle East. They have let me see. This, I think, is an oil field down here. And so there is like oil under the ground. They started in the oil industry, I think, in the early 80s, but it or actually, I don't think it was oil. I think it was natural gas. They closed down the company like 20 years ago because the company wasn't making money. It was like losing money. It was not like a profitable company. So they closed the company down that was running their natural gas, which was not substantial. But they were operating at a loss, so they shut it down. And right now there are exploratory endeavors in place to explore how to basically resurrect the natural gas and oil industry in Israel. But that's going to take years. That's not on the forefront. That's years down the road. There's a lot of moving parts to make that happen. And you can see the not in use sign here for the 1952 map. Because remember, 1952 is 5 years after the Nakba. So Netanyahu does this press conference. Let me see if I have it right here. And he makes this one statement that is very telling as to what they're actually after here. And it's right. Where is this video? Let me see if I can just search for it. It's a weapons industry. Here it is. Okay.
Produce an independent arms industry.
And so he's presenting all these charts to explain how the Israeli economy is actually doing very strong, despite all these reports that are talking about how much it's collapsing, because not only are people being conscripted into the IDF and forced to leave their jobs, forced to leave their businesses, there are also people just leaving the country because they don't feel safe living in Israel anymore. So they're leaving the country and they're not coming back. So you're losing your consumer base, you're losing your taxpayer base, you're losing your workforce. Businesses have, are going insolvent and because of cash flow issues and going bankrupt because of conscription into the IDF. And so he's basically trying to do some damage control here with this press conference, but he makes this statement, which is important.
So we are going to produce an independent arms industry, very powerful, very strong, that can withstand any kind of international political constraints and will provide security for the state of Israel. This is what I envision for the state. So we are going.
Yeah. So a few things there. This is not practical whatsoever. And I think I've seen a lot of economists come out and like defense industry experts come out and say this is like asking if he's like high on drugs when he's saying this, because not only does Israel, because of their lack of natural resources, like I said, they have oil and they have natural gas, but they aren't actively like extracting that right now. I have a chart here of what the Israeli economy looks like, and an outline of the Israeli economy. It's 26% of their GDP comes from software. That's like their two biggest things basically are like software and pharmaceutical chemicals, like chemicals for pharmaceuticals. Let me see if I have this here, GDP. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so this is from a report that was published by the Israeli government. I think it was published. This is from 2017. And this is published by the Israeli government. So this is coming from Israel itself. And it says the technology division, the leading tech sectors in high tech in Israel, responsible for 45% of the total Israeli exports, amounting to 45 billion in 2017. 27% of this is computing softwares. Okay. 16% is pharmaceutical products, which are like the chemicals that are then the raw chemicals that are shipped out, and then pharmaceutical companies put the chemicals into the medicines that Big Pharma sells. And then 12% are electronic components, electronical components. All right. So that's like half their economy right there, is that stuff. And then the rest of this list is like electronic and optical equipment, medical and surgical equipment. It's like really small components that you're manufacturing. You're not making steel, you're not making concrete, you're not making you're not producing engines, you're not producing any, you're importing all that stuff. You're also not really producing food. You know, I understand there's some like luxury goods that come from Israel, like olive oil or other luxury food goods, but they're not like shipping out wheat. They're not shipping out that stuff. They're importing all of that. And that was a big deal when the Houthis started their attacks in the Red Sea, because they were basically attacking ships that were bringing food to Israel. And so the Saudis then redirected those ships to the UAE, and then the Saudis paid for trucks that drove across the Arabian Peninsula and delivered them to Israel to make sure that people in Israel didn't starve, which goes to show, the Arab hospitality, the fact that they were looking out for Israel like that. So again, there is no real manufacturing base. They have a high-tech manufacturing base, but they don't produce concrete. They don't produce steel. They don't produce aluminum. They don't produce rubber. They don't produce plastics. They don't produce any of the raw materials that you need to build the buildings that you would, the factories that would then produce these weapons, let alone the raw materials that you need to actually make the weapons themselves. They don't produce gunpowder. All of this stuff is imported. Whenever they're building buildings in Israel, they're importing. Not only are they importing the materials for the construction project, a lot of times they're importing the contractors to do the work, because They don't have the specialty and the expertise, locally to cover every single trade. So again, you can't even build that up. Like, that's going to take years to build that up. You got to build that support base up before you can then talk about becoming an independent economy that is self-sufficient. Then you can talk about producing weapons. But, again, you're 3 to 5 years out from, if you had everything ready to go today, you're 3 to 5 years out from probably producing your first weapons. And that's before you address the logistical challenges of how are you going to get raw materials in here. So when Netanyahu says this stuff, he's probably thinking in his head, well, we're just going to get the raw materials from America. America is going to send us the raw materials and maybe a few other key allies, and then we're just going to make the weapons ourselves. But again, a lot of issues there with that. But that's also a sign that Netanyahu is very worried about what's happening here. So it's during this press conference that he says, I'm going to the White House on September 29th to meet with Donald Trump. Well, the truth is that he's actually going to New York. I think he's in the air right now. I think he flew over last night. So he's in D.C. Today. He'll be in D.C. And then he's speaking at the UN tomorrow. And that's really why he's in America. Is he's giving an address to the UN tomorrow, and then he's coming to the White House on Monday to meet with Trump. He's not coming in the White House before. He's coming to the White House after, which is telling. After Netanyahu puts this out, Trump puts out on Truth Social. Trump is asked about it. He's sitting there having a press conference with Keir Starmer, and he puts out a post saying that he has invited Erdoğan, who is Netanyahu's kind of arch nemesis in this whole narrative back and forth. And he says that I've invited Erdoğan to come to the White House to meet with me. And I think he actually may put that out last Thursday. Let me see exactly what day it was. It was this one. It was 5 days ago. So let me pull this up on screen. I'm pleased to host President Erdoğan of Turkey at the White House on September 25th. And this is posted on September 19th, which is last Friday. All right. So he puts this out on Friday. But the real key here is he says, we are working on many trade and military deals with the president, including the large-scale purchase of Boeing aircraft, a major F-16 deal, and a continuation of the F-35 talks, which we expect to conclude positively. And this is the key. The key here is the F-35 thing is going to be interesting. I mean, if they announce an F-35 deal, that's going to be a mind like a head game he's playing with Netanyahu, because that's going to throw Netanyahu through a loop. The F-35 is what Netanyahu, or what the IDF uses, and no other Muslim country has ever been sold the F-35. They've all wanted the F-35, but and opinions vary on whether the F-35 is actually a dominant fighter jet. But the F-16 absolutely is. And so before we get to talk about the F-16, let's talk about what the Syrian president said yesterday. So this is Jelani, the former ISIS head chopper turned president, who was basically installed by Netanyahu in Israel back in December when he overthrew Assad. But they've updated this article. I have the original one, but this is the one, like the updated one that was updated today. And it says at UN, they call him Sharad now. His old name was Jelani. Blasts Israeli airstrikes, but says Syria committed to dialogue. He also said, we are scared of Israel. He says, we are scared of Israel. He insists that Syria poses no threat. And he says, we are not the ones creating the problems for Israel. We are scared of Israel, not the other way around. And he's talking about all of these fighter aircraft that are flying overhead in southern Syria, trying to establish an Israeli airspace, like air dominance. And so Turkey, of course, is also in Syria. They're in the northern part of Syria, and Trump has been backing Turkey narratively ever since Assad was overthrown in December. He put out the Truth Social post congratulating Erdoğan on taking control of Syria. But let's look at the F-16 real quick, because this is what I'm really looking for out of this meeting. I'm looking for the F-16 announcement. Okay, so the F-16 Fighting Falcon. I wrote about this in the Badlands news brief this morning. General Dynamics, now Lockheed Martin's F-16 Fighting Falcon. So the Fighting Falcon, it's one of the smallest. I think it is the smallest fighter jet in service, as far as as far as American made goes. It's very small, it's very fast, it's very agile, and it's called the Falcon because the falcon in nature is the most notorious avivore raptor. A raptor being a bird of prey, and an avivore being an animal that eats birds. So the falcon is a bird of prey that eats other birds, and it eats other birds by attacking the bird in mid-flight and killing it. And so therefore, as it says right here, it was designed as an all superiority day fighter, that its number one role is to be a dog fighting combat plane. And the key features are a frameless bubble canopy. So you can see in the picture right here, it has gives the pilot full 360-degree view during a dogfight. It has a special frame inside, so it can pull 9 Gs of force, which I think the F-18 maxes out at 7.5 before it starts to bend. And then the seat is actually, you can't really tell from this, but the seat in the cockpit is actually reclined in a special way so that when you're pulling these G-forces, the blood is retained in the pilot's brain so he doesn't lose consciousness. So and it's very small and it's very nimble. So it's designed to be a combat dogfighting aircraft. And it's also the most, even though it's 50 years old, it's also the most high demand, the most coveted, and the most widely used. 4,600 have been produced since 1976. Over 2,000 are still operational worldwide. It's the most, which makes it the most common fixed wing aircraft in military service anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world you go, you're going to find an F-16 because that's the best. It's the standard for dogfighting and for air superiority. So if you're trying to deter the IDF, you're going to send F-16s because I'm sure we probably have plenty of them that we can afford to send next week. The F-35, if we do announce an F-35 deal, and I don't know if they will, if you go back to Trump's Truth Social, he says the continuation of F-35 talks, maybe he announces an F-35 deal, but those F-35s probably have to be built. And that's probably going to be a year or two before they're actually on the ground in Turkey. And then the pilots have to be trained up on them. F-16, I imagine they can probably deploy pretty quickly. And he says we expect this all to conclude positively. Okay, it looks like, let's add this to stage. Looks like Erdogan's arrived. Okay, so there's Hadan. I'm sorry, Fidan. Fidan is the Turkish prime minister. Hakan Fidan. Or I'm sorry, not the prime minister, the foreign minister, minister of foreign affairs. I'm trying to see who else I can identify. So yeah, again, Trump inviting Erdogan the day before Netanyahu was scheduled to speak at the UN, and surely Trump knew for a while that was on the docket. He probably knew for a while that Netanyahu was speaking on September 26th. So last Friday, he's like, "All right, Erdogan, why don't you come the day before?" Again, this is all a chess match, I think, because this is, even if nothing comes of this, if this is just like a meeting that nothing is announced, this is still, a psychological snipe at Netanyahu. The fact that Erdogan is at the White House and not Netanyahu, because Netanyahu, remember, is in DC today. Erdogan and Netanyahu have been trading barbs for the past couple years, ever since October 7th specifically. Netanyahu's security cabinet, Israel Katz, who was the defense minister, or I'm sorry, he was the foreign minister last year. He's now the defense minister. When he was the the foreign minister, the foreign affairs minister, you know, their secretary of state, he said publicly that Erdogan should watch himself. You saw what happened to Saddam Hussein. Maybe you'll be next. And I think Ben Gvir has repeated that threat. I think it was Ben Gvir. It was another one who made the same threat, who said, or maybe no. It was Israel Katz made the exact same threat to the Iranian President Pezeshkian. So we're going to wait for their Oval Office meeting to start. That's probably not going to be immediate, but maybe it'll be here in the next 30 minutes. We'll see. Okay, yeah. So Jessica's going to keep an eye on that. Let us know when this thing goes live. But you never know. Like, this stuff sometimes it starts on time and sometimes they're an hour late. So I didn't want to jump on at 11:30 thinking that we were going to have some time, and then they just start talking at 11:30. I wanted to give a little bit of pregame context to what we're looking at here. And what we're looking at here basically is a ground war with Iran, because Colonel McGregor, let me see if I have that clip. Colonel McGregor has been warning that that the plan is for Israel to start a ground war with Iran between now and December. Let's see if I can find that. Okay, I'm seeing like long form podcasts, like an hour and a half long from June, where he's talking about this, but I'm looking specifically for the clip from last week. Okay, this is from seven days ago.
Decide sort of international
facilitation by the U.S. Why does the U.S. permit attacks on allies?
And so the context of his question from Napolitano is why was the attack by Israel against Qatar, which happened, I think the day before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, September 9th. Why is that permitted if Qatar is like one of our really close allies? It's where CENTCOM is located, the largest air base in the Middle East now that Bagram's gone. Why is that permitted?
Well, I think the only answer that I can come up with at this stage is that the Israel lobby controls these decisions. I can't imagine that if President Trump were a completely independent actor, that he would decide so quickly to cast aside sort of international norms when it comes to negotiation. So I assume that the Israel lobby is ultimately in control of these kinds of decisions. And if
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with President Erdoğan of Turkey, and we've been friends for a long time.
We're getting started.
Even for 4 years when I was in exile, unfairly, as it turns out. Rigged election, he knows about rigged elections better than anybody. But when I was in exile, we were still friends. That's always a good way to find out, test of friendship. But he's a highly respected man. He's respected very much in his country and all throughout Europe and throughout the world where they know him. He's built a tremendous military, powerful military, uses a lot of our equipment. And it's an honor to have him at the White House. We're going to have a lunch together. We're going to have a discussion, big discussion. We do a lot of trade with Turkey, and we're going to continue. We're going to do some additional trade. They want to buy F-16s, F-35s, and some other things. And we're going to talk to them about that. And we're just going to have, I think, a very interesting couple of hours. We're going to get a lot done. But I have great respect for this man. And we've had a very good relationship for a long time. If you remember, he led Pastor Brunson. He freed Pastor Brunson. Pastor Brunson was put in jail for 35 years before I got there. This was a group that should have stopped it. And the president, after I called him, released him, which was a great thing for our Christian community, our evangelical community. The evangelicals really, really wanted that. It was very important to him, so I always remembered that. But he released him from 35 years in prison. And Pastor Brunson now is healthy, happy, and well. And we're very happy about that. But it's a great honor to have the president of Turkey with us. And how are you?
Fine.
Say a few words.
And you?
Great guy.
Öncelikle bu ziyaretimizi Birleşmiş Milletler Genel Kurulu ile iç içe olan bir dönemde gerçekleştirdiğimizden dolayı arkadaşlarımla beraber çok mutluyuz. Gerek Sayın Trump'ın birinci döneminde gerekse ikinci dönemde Türkiye-Amerika ilişkilerinde farklı bir süreci yaşıyoruz. Kendilerinin de az önce ifade ettiği gibi gerek F-35 konusu, gerek F-16 konusu, gerekse Halk Bankası'yla ilgili aramızdaki ilişkiler konusunu bugün etraflıca görüşme fırsatı bulacağımıza inanıyorum. Heybeliada okuluyla ilgili ise orada üzerimize ne düşerse biz onu zaten yapmaya hazırız. Dönünce de Sayın Bartolomeo'yla bu konuyu görüşme fırsatı bulacağım.
First, Mr. President, I am very pleased that this visit actually coincides with the 80th UNGA. So I am very pleased to be here with my colleagues and friends. And as we have said, during the first term of your presidency and during your second term, we are able to carry Turkey and U.S. relations to a much different level and process. And as you've said, we have an opportunity here today to be able to discuss some of the issues regarding the F-35, the F-16, and also the Halkbank case, and we will have an opportunity to thoroughly discuss them. And based on what you have mentioned regarding the Heybeliada school, we are ready to do whatever we can that falls on our part, and I will, when I get back, try to discuss this issue with the esteemed Mr. Bartolomos to discuss how we can move forward on that.
Okay, very good. I would like to be able to do that, the Greek Orthodox Church was here and they would really like to have some help. They need some help. And I said I'd mention it. We appreciate it. So this is a tough man. This is a guy who's highly opinionated. Usually I don't like opinionated people, but I always like this one. But he's a tough one. And he does an amazing job in his country. And we've had tremendous relationships, both having to do with war and having to do with trade. And I guess today we're talking about both. I'd like to have him stop buying any oil from Russia while Russia continues this rampage against Ukraine. And they've been fighting. They've lost millions of lives already. And for what? For what? It's disgraceful. And I said yesterday, let it keep going because their economy is absolutely terrible right now. And I think it's a shame that they're doing that, killing a lot of people unnecessarily. 7,818 people were killed last week, mostly military people, their people and Ukrainians. More Russians actually than Ukraine, a little bit more. But it's such a waste of human life. And so he ought to stop. Putin ought to stop. And with that, we'll get to a little bit of a discussion. We're going to make some great trade deals for both countries. We do a lot of business with Turkey. They build great products. They build beautiful, great products, really fantastic manufacturers. And we buy a lot from them and they buy a lot from us. Would you have any questions, please?
You repeatedly called out Obama and Biden administrations for their stupid decisions. One example you gave was the refusal to sell the Patriot missile defense systems to Turkey, which resulted in the expulsion of the country from the F-35 program. Now, you are known to be a great deal maker in Turkey. What can you do to undo this stupidity? Yes, CNN, sir.
CNN? Well, because you sounded like a nice guy, but CNN is fake news. I mean, but you sound like the real deal to me, so I'll answer the question. We're going to be discussing the Patriot system, which is the best system. We'll discuss that. We're going to discuss the F-35. We'll be discussing all of the things that you know about and that some of that you mentioned. And I think he'll be successful with buying the things he'd like to buy.
What concrete steps can you take?
Well, we'll have to see. We haven't even started yet. But I know he wants the F-35, and he's wanted that, and we're talking about that very seriously. And the F-16, we're in great shape. Certain other things he needed, as you know, and I'm going to see to it that we get that to him. He needs certain things, and we need certain things. And we're going to come to a conclusion. You'll know by the end of the day. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President.
Sayın Cumhurbaşkanı, siz Başkan Trump'ın ne kadar barış için çabalar gösterdiğini daha önce de söylemiş bir cumhurbaşkanısınız. Siz de bölgede birçok ülkeyle, birçok liderle görüşmeler, kontaklar kurabiliyorsunuz. Bu konuda birlikte nasıl çalışabilirsiniz gelecekte?
Buna inandığım için zaten bunları söylüyorum. Birlikte el ele bölgedeki bu sıkıntıları aşacağımıza da inanıyorum.
Mr. President, tariffs,
When are you planning
Because I haven't learned this language yet.
Yes.
What did he say?
The gentleman was asking, Mr. President, you have referred to President Trump's peace efforts, and you have also contact with many leaders in the region. And what do you think that you can do about this? And Mr. President has said that, yes, I believe in the peace efforts that President Trump is leading, and together we will be able to overcome the challenges in the region.
I think it's true. He's got tremendous influence in the region. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, when are you planning to lift CAATSA sanctions against Turkey?
Against sanctions against Turkey?
CAATSA.
Could be very soon.
Mr.
If we have a
President,
good meeting, almost immediately.
President Erdoğan is removing tariffs on U.S. goods, and what impact it would be in U.S. production?
Where are you from?
Turkey.
I see. We have a lot of people from Turkey here. That's
We are
good. Because I like the
restaurants
questions
here.
very much, actually. They're very nice questions. And we'll see about tariffs. We're going to be talking about tariffs.
We already removed them.
Well, we're going to be talking about that.
Sanctions on Russia, even if not all NATO countries stop purchasing Russian oil?
We're going to be seeing about that. The NATO countries were disappointing in that regard, but they've been very amazing in other ways. They did, as you know, they went from 2% to 5% GDP, and that's a big step, and it's paid. I mean, they have the money there. And we're selling a tremendous amount of military equipment to NATO. We're selling. We're not giving like Biden did. We're selling it to NATO, and it's a lot. They're buying a lot, and I assume they're giving it to Ukraine. They could buy it for other reasons too, but I assume they're giving most of it to Ukraine. But they're buying highly sophisticated weaponry, and they're paying for it full price. And that's how we're involved. Biden gave $350 billion. Look, this war would have never started if I were president. If I were president, this war would never be happened. Would have never happened. Yeah.
Mr. President, I would like to ask about Gaza. Are you on the same page, Mr. Erdoğan, for Palestine, Israel?
Well, I don't know his stance. I can't tell you about that. I just say that we want to get Gaza over with. I had a great meeting with the leaders of that area, of that region. Generally speaking, the Middle East. We had a great meeting the other day at UNGA, as you know, and I think we're close to getting some kind of a deal done. Yeah, we want to get the hostages back. I have to get the hostages back. We're the ones that got the hostages, all of them that we have now. But it looks like there are 20 living hostages and probably 38 or so dead hostages. Pretty sad. And the parents of those dead souls, those dead, mostly men, boys, many cases like literally boys, they want those bodies back so badly, as much as though they were alive. And so we had a very good meeting with the representatives of the most powerful countries in the Middle East, and I think we're going to be close to a deal.
We've noticed that in the Ukraine war and during the Israeli-Iran war, the airspace of the NATO countries is very fragile, and it needs to be stronger. And in that sense, Turkey being the second largest army in NATO, it needs to support its air force and air defense. How do you look at this issue in general as a NATO?
Well, we support them. I mean, we're in NATO, and you know, they're paying now 5% of GDP. Nobody thought that was possible, and they agreed to that 6 months ago when I was there. And the relationship is very good. The NATO countries with us, is the strongest it's ever been. We used to complain that they're paying 2%, but they're not paying. The United States was paying almost everything. And now they're paying 5%, and they paid. And that's trillions of dollars. You know, we're talking about trillions of dollars. And they're spending that, giving that money to us, and we are giving them great defensive, you know, the Patriots and all of the different javelins, all the different missile systems and everything else that they want. But it's, you know, it's trillions of dollars. So we appreciate that they did that. So they went from 2% to 5% of GDP, and that was something that nobody even would bring up. Biden should have brought it up a long time ago, because under Biden, we paid $350 billion, and all it did is make things worse. So we'll see how it goes.
35s to Turkey, fighter jets, F-35s.
Yeah, we're talking about the fighter jets for Turkey. Yes, we are.
Are we going to see any steps going to be taken today about the issue, about the things that are going on in the Gaza, Palestine? Are we going to?
It could be today. Yeah, could be today. We have a very strong dialogue going on with Saudi Arabia. With, I would say, you have 4 or 5 real leaders that are being good. As you know, I met with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. We met with Jordan. The King of Jordan was there. We had a really great meeting. I think a lot was determined at that meeting. And I have to meet with Israel, and I have to do that also. They know what I want, and I think we can get that one done. I hope we can get it done. A lot of people are dying, but we want the hostages back. We don't want them back, 1 this week, 1 in 2 months from now, 3 later, and you know, like the way it's been going. We got them all back. We got a lot of them back. We got our American the American Alexander, we got the American hostages back. But we have now 20 plus 38 bodies, dead bodies. And we want them all back. And we want them back at one time.
President Erdoğan will help to release the hostages?
Do I think what?
Do you think President Erdoğan will help to release the hostages?
I don't know if he'll help in that. I don't really think we have, I don't think it'll be necessary in this case. I think we're going to be in a pretty good position. There are a lot of people that want that done. I met with great leaders. Look, over, you saw the people that were there, and great leaders. Egypt was also represented. We met with the leaders of that part of the world, and they want to see if they can get something done. And I'm going to have to tell Israel, let's go. We want to get the hostages back. Everybody wants to see that war over with, by the way. Everybody. So we're going to see what happens.
Mr. President, how do you see a joint initiative with President Erdoğan to bring the President of Russia, Putin, and President Zelensky to the negotiating table?
Well, I can tell you that President Erdoğan is very respected by both of them. Everybody respects Erdoğan. They really respect Erdoğan. I do. And I think he could have a big influence if he wants to. Right now, he's very neutral. He likes being neutral. So do I like being neutral. But he's somebody that if he got involved, the best thing he could do is not buy oil and gas from Russia. If he did that, that would be probably the best thing. He knows Putin like I know Putin. I thought Putin, I settled, as you know, 7 wars, and it's probably more than that if you really want to know the real facts, but 7 wars. And I thought this would be among the easier ones to settle. But I'm very disappointed in Putin. And he's been fighting hard. He's been fighting long, and they lost millions. They lost like 1 million soldiers. And, you know, with all of the heavy bombardment over the last 2 weeks, they've gained almost no land. Think of that. They've gained almost no land. And I'm not going to ever call anybody a paper tiger, but Russia spent millions and millions of dollars in bombs, missiles, ammunition, and lives, their lives. And they've gained virtually no land. I think it's time to stop. I really do.
Mr. President,
a few months ago, you met with Aliyev and Pashinyan. Can you follow up?
So where?
You met with Aliyev and Pashinyan, Azerbaijan President Aliyev and Pashinyan. Can you follow up on what you want to say about current process?
No, I can't. I like this guy. I like him. He's from CNN. Fake news, the worst fake news, but I like him. So it's CNN Turkey. I'll get Brian. Go.
Syria has been a major issue between the two countries for the past decade. And you said the future to Syria is in Erdogan's hands back in, I think, December and January. And the countries are in the process of integrating regional fractures into the main government. When do you want to see that happen?
Well, I think President Erdogan is the one responsible for Syria, for the successful fight in ridding Syria of its past leader. And I think this man is responsible. He doesn't take the responsibility, but it's actually a great achievement. They've been trying to do it for 2,000 years. I said, he does it. He did it. I mean, they're your surrogates. I think you should take the credit for it. I told him, take the credit. For 2,000 years, you've been trying to take over Syria. He took over Syria, and he doesn't want to take the credit. You know, all of those people are his surrogates. But the leader of Syria, the new leader, as you know, I took sanctions off in order to let them breathe because the sanctions were very strong. But I think we should have a major announcement today. He was responsible for that victory. It was a victory for Turkey because they've been fighting, as you know, for like 1,000 years. And it never went, you know, it was back and forth, but he's responsible for that. So he would have a lot to say with respect to Syria. But at his request, I took, and the request also of the King of Saudi Arabia, It's very interesting. And Qatar, they said if you could take the sanctions, we had very strong sanctions. They couldn't have lived with those sanctions, and I took them off to give them a chance to breathe. But the president was one of the people that was responsible for that. He asked me to do it.
Mr. President, furloughs are very typical when the government shuts down. Why is the administration directing federal layoffs of federal workers this time around?
Well, this is all caused by the Democrats. They asked us to do something that's totally unreasonable. They never change. They want to give money away to illegally, people that entered our country illegally. They want to give them massive federal money. And we don't want to do that because it means everyone's going to just keep pouring back. Right now, we have absolutely perfect borders like you haven't seen in many years, even better than I had great borders during my 4 years, but these borders are stone cold closed. You can only come into our country legally now, but the Democrats want to give it all away. They want to open up the borders. Take a look at that. Big thing. They want to open borders again after what we're going through now, getting rid of prisoners, getting rid of all of these people dropped out from mental institutions, drug dealers, drug addicts, everything. They're putting everybody into our country. It's all ended now. But this is what Schumer wants. This is what the Democrats want. They want to have, and they want to take our money. We're doing well because of tariffs. We're doing unbelievable. We're making more money than we ever have made. And by the way, we're going to take some of that tariff money that we made, just to get off the subject for a second. We're going to take some of that tariff money that we made. We're going to give it to our farmers, who are for a little while going to be hurt until it kicks in. The tariffs kick into their benefit. So we're going to make sure that our farmers are in great shape because we're taking in a lot of money. We're finding, the other day, it was very interesting. They found $31 billion. They said, sir, we found 31. I said, you mean positively, right? They said, yeah, 31 million more than we knew. And they said, we don't know where it came from. I said, check the tariff shelf. They came back the following morning. They said, you're right, sir, it came from the tariffs. We've never seen anything like this. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking some money from all of the tariff money that we've taken, and we're going to distribute it to our farmers until the tariffs kick into their benefit, which ultimately the farmers are going to be making a fortune. But it's a process of, it has to kick in. All right, maybe one more.
President, there was another shooting at an ICE facility in Texas yesterday.
Terrible.
Detainees were killed. The FBI director posted on social media bullets that were engraved with the message anti-ICE.
Right.
He just posted another thing on social media saying they recovered a handwritten note from the subject that read, hopefully this will give ICE agents real terror to think, is there a sniper with AP rounds on that roof? Who do you hold responsible for the uptick in left-wing violence in the country?
Radical left rhetoric. The radical left is causing the problem. They're out of control. They're saying things, and they're really dumb people. I mean, I look at Crockett. I look at some of these people. They're very low IQ people, actually. But the radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them. I mean, bad things happen when they play these games. And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left, but the right's not doing this. They're not doing it, and they better not get them energized because it won't be good for the left. And I don't want to see that happen either. I'm the president of all the people. But the radical left is causing this. The radical left Democrats are causing this problem, and it gets worse. It gets worse, and it'll be a point where other people won't take it anymore, and that will not be good for the radical left, and we don't want that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, it seems like an indictment of James Comey is imminent. Would this be the first step in accountability for pushing the hoax of Russia, along with Barack Obama involved as well?
Well, I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General, Todd Blanche, and Lindsay Halligan, who's very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI. And, but I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. All right. Welcome back, everyone. This is a good sign. I think this is, they took questions pretty much almost immediately. We saw Erdoğan walk in while we were doing some pregame. And then they went, they didn't waste any time, 10 minutes. And then they took questions. I think Trump was very forthright. There were a lot of narratives that were out there that I wanted to dissect a little bit. You heard him say a lot of the things that I was talking about in the pregame. You heard him talk about the F-16s. You heard him talk about the F-35s. Welcome to everyone from Badlands Daily. Let me back up for a second. Shout out to Rookie Irish. Everyone, please say your prayers. Say a prayer for Rookie Irish. His dad is not doing well right now, so we want to say prayers for Rookie Irish and his family and his dad. So thinking about y'all. But welcome everyone from Badlands Daily, who came in during the interview. We can kind of summarize some of the stuff that Trump was talking about. Quick recap of what we talked about before that you heard Trump mention there. The F-16. So Trump invited Erdoğan last Friday to come today. The importance and significance of it happening today is that Netanyahu, I think, is in DC now. If he's not in DC, he's or New York. He's about to land in New York. He's on his way from Israel. He's speaking at the UN tomorrow, and then he is scheduled to come to the White House on Monday. But before all that, Erdoğan gets invited, and the significance, of course, is because of what's happening in Syria. So let's just start with Syria because that's the big storyline here. And you heard him talking about Syria, and Trump reiterated. Number one, Trump reminded everyone that Erdoğan is his guy. He said this in 2019. He said Erdoğan is a good man, and basically said he's my guy. Let me add this to the stage. There we go. Okay, so this, for those who've been listening to my shows, this will all be familiar, but I'll try to be as concise and brief as I can. This is what we're looking at here with Syria is this map. Okay. So this is from February of this year. And the significance of it is the yellow with the blue stripes. The yellow represents SDF control, which is the Syrian Defense Force control. And the blue represents the Israeli army control. And so the Israeli army is in the Golan Heights, but they're also in this southern portion of Syria. They've actually pushed up, I believe. I think they're surrounding Damascus at this point. So it's this whole southern branch. You have the Tamph base, the American base at Tamph, but every other base, that's the only American base that we have west of the Euphrates River. And remember, guys, the Euphrates River, which let me show you a bigger map. You have the Euphrates River, which runs right through Syria and Iraq, and then you have the Tigris River. Okay. The Euphrates River is the most important river, arguably, in human history. Between the, and then they come together here at Baghdad, or I'm sorry, they come together here at north of Al Basra, and then they're known as the Tigris Euphrates River. But the Tigris Euphrates River Valley, which is the area between the two rivers, is called the cradle of civilization. That's where the Bible happened. That's where ancient civilization was cultivated. Western civilization was cultivated. Ancient Mesopotamia, all of that. And of course, ancient Babylon, and others, other stories that are biblical and pre-biblical. So the Euphrates River cuts Syria in half. There are no bases, U.S. bases in Western Syria, there except for Tamph, down here on the border of Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. All the bases we have are east of the Euphrates River in what is known as Kurdistan. So the Kurds are an ethnic group that was basically left out of consideration in 1919 when they drew the lines to carve up the modern Middle East at the end of World War I. This was Britain and France, primarily with America, doing this. But really, the Kurds, if looking at it from a more Machiavellian and clear-eyed view, I think this was done intentionally because the Kurds are a very useful instrument then for destabilizing any of the countries on screen here. They have a pretty significant portion of Iran, a significant portion of Iraq, over a quarter of Turkey, and here it's shown as like a fraction of Syria, but since the Syrian civil war, they basically have pushed up to the Euphrates River. And you can see now the yellow here is the territory that's controlled by the Kurds. Okay, and so the Kurds have always been our ally. They're allies of the United States. They're allies of NATO. They're allies of Israel. But that's because primarily NATO and the CIA uses them to destabilize these places. Because these people earnestly want autonomy, like they want self-governance. So we exploit that natural human desire for self-governance, self-determination, and that's what the CIA is very famous for doing. So you see all the bases. Most of our bases are down here along the Euphrates River, but then we have, or most of our main bases, and then we have a bunch scattered up here. A lot of speculation. If you look at the Q drops and you look at some other information that's out there, a lot of speculation that when the Iran nuclear deal was put in place by Obama in 2015, the program went quote unquote underground. It was moved somewhere in this region up here north of Hasaka. That's the speculation. There's no sauce to determine that, but the speculation is that if there was like an underground program, it would have been somewhere in the Syrian desert. And again, look at how many U.S. bases we have in this area. So a lot of like nefarious implications there. Okay. Now, the reason that this corridor right here is important, this is known as David's Corridor, and the speculation from a lot of analysts is that Israel wants to establish this corridor, which I assume at this point is probably up and running, because they want a land bridge across Syria into Kurdistan, because once they reach Kurdistan, they can move troops, equipment, everything to the Euphrates River, move across the Euphrates River, and then once they get into Kurdistan, the Kurds can help them get into Iran, and they can start a ground war with Iran. Now, Colonel McGregor has been saying for a while now, since at least June, that the plan is by the end of the year for Israel to start a ground war with Iran, and that's like widely understood, at least in the circles that in which he's involved, like he's discussing things, is that it's understood that that's what's going to happen. They're going to try to start a ground war with Iran. Now, from the deep state's perspective, the deep state wants a war between Iran and Turkey, because remember, Turkey is a member of NATO. They're one of the first members of NATO, 1952. And the reason that we brought Turkey in is because Turkey controls the access between Russia and the Mediterranean. You can kind of see it right here. But remember, Ukraine's up here and Russia's up here. In order for Russia to get to the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, they have to go through Istanbul, the Turkish Straits, and then around Greece and out to the Atlantic. The only other way for them to get there is to go all the way through the Arctic Circle, go over like Britain and Scandinavia. So it can be done, but it's just a much longer trip if you're trying to get down to like the Southern Atlantic or the Indian Ocean. It's much quicker to come through the Mediterranean and go through the Suez Canal and down the Red Sea. And so that's why Turkey is one of the key players in NATO, despite the fact that they are not really a European country, although in the late 90s, they became an observing member of the EU and they were making a pivot towards joining the EU. Now they're pivoting back. They haven't become a formal member of the EU. They're just like an observing member. But now they're pivoting back to the East, and they have one foot in the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which Matt Ehret and I talk about all the time. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is like the that's the beachhead against the Western hegemony. That's the confederation of sovereign nations that are trying to develop a trade partnership, for lack of a better word, a trade infrastructure, a global trade infrastructure that is not globalist, if that makes sense. So again, Syria is very important because of this diagram. Remember, there were 2 pipelines that were planned to run through Syria. The green one was backed by Putin. The red one was backed by NATO and the Qataris and basically the people who were involved in 9/11. Both need to go through Syria, okay? And both are natural gas pipelines. The Qataris go to Assad in 2009, 2010 and say, we need this. And Assad tells them to pound sand because he's boys with Putin. And then the Qataris go to, this is the evil twin, the bad twin in Qatar, goes to Hillary Clinton at that point, Secretary of State, and says, Hillary, we need an answer here. We need help. $25 million allegedly donated to the Clinton Foundation. And then, of course, we get the Arab Spring, which is what this map is that I just was showing. This is February of 2011. Every country that has a fist on it had a color revolution within like a month or two of each other. And where it was most effective was Libya and Egypt. Libya, Egypt, and eventually Syria. Libya was overthrown. Of course, Gaddafi was ousted. His armory, the largest private armory in the world, tanks, aircraft, chemical weapons, that was raided. Remember, Gaddafi calls Hillary Clinton famously and says, I surrender, like tell these people surrender. She says, all right, if you surrender, we'll let you live. So he surrenders, and then the rebels go into his castle and drag him out, and then on live stream on the internet, torture him and butcher him on live stream. Then Hillary Clinton goes on whatever CBS and laughs about it and says it was funny that happened. And remember, before very early in 2011, before this occurs, Lindsey Graham, Richard Blumenthal, Marco Rubio, John McCain go to Libya, meet with the guys who go and overthrow Gaddafi later. And John McCain also goes to Syria and meets with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And if that name sounds familiar, that's the name of the guy who died like a dog in the cave. Remember Conan, the hero dog? Conan chases the guy into the cave, and the guy blows up his suicide vest, and Conan gets hurt, and he gets a medal from Trump. That was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He was the leader of ISIS. And there is a video that CNN put out because the CNN crew went with John McCain. It's in the intro of the Book of Trump. It's the part in the Book of Trump where I circle John McCain's head and I circle the other guy's head. That's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He's sitting in a room meeting face to face with John McCain. And that's because the Republican Party helped the Obama administration create ISIS. The weapons are taken from Libya. They're sent to Cyprus and Turkey. And then as the story goes, NATO is operating in Turkey. Turkey is like NATO's, Colonel Tanner Watkins will tell you, Turkey is like NATO's little haven for launching Operation Gladio and color regime change operations across the Middle East. They do it all out of Eastern Turkey. Remember, Kurdistan. So they send these weapons to Eastern Turkey, and then they walk them across the border into Syria and Iraq, and then out of Syria and Iraq, these rebels, which at the time the media is like, oh, these brave rebels, they're standing up for their freedom, they're taking back their country. The rebels then become later known as ISIS. These are individual militias that are all operating on their own, independent of one another, and then all of a sudden they join this one team under this one banner, and that banner becomes the Islamic State in Syria, otherwise known as ISIS. Obama called him ISIL, the Islamic State in the Levant. The Levant is the crest that runs through the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. So I'm just connecting all the dots here. Okay. So again, Syria is like the linchpin for all of this. And then here, General Flynn reposted a thread back in December which was great, which talked about how Assad actually wasn't the bad guy and Assad actually was, protected the Christians and was actually a force of good in the Middle East. He wasn't the evil dictator that the media portrayed him to be. Here is a map that was one of the first slides in that thread that shows you this is where all the people who served in ISIS came from. All right. They weren't just like locals, like local Iraqis and Syrians fighting for their country. They were imported from all over the world to serve in this army. And that's exactly, by the way, what Zbigniew Brzezinski did in the 1970s and 1980s in Afghanistan when they created the Mujahideen with Osama bin Laden. Brad Zerbo talks about that in Codex 9/11. They used Pakistan as the funding mechanism. They gave money to Pakistan, and then Pakistan was the one giving the money out to Osama bin Laden and his master. The guy's name escapes me. Yeah, and that's how the Mujahideen in Afghanistan fought the Soviets, and then later the Mujahideen rebrands itself as Al-Qaeda. So again, it's the U.S. government creating, through its proxies, creating Al-Qaeda, and then later creating ISIS. It's Hegelian dialectic. We're creating the problem, and then we're presenting the solution, military response, okay? So this all ties in to what we just saw with Turkey, because in December, as Trump said during that press conference, when Assad is overthrown, December 8th, it's like December 7th through December 9th, it was like the standoff. And then December 9th, I think, is when Assad is he's forced onto a Russian helicopter in Latakia, which is here on the very, on the coastline of Syria, and flown to Moscow. And that's where he is now. Right after that, Trump puts out the post congratulating Erdoğan that Erdoğan was the one who overthrew Assad. He doesn't give credit to HTS. He doesn't give credit to Jelani. He doesn't give credit to Netanyahu, even though Jelani was being backed by Netanyahu and NATO. Okay. And Jelani, if we go back to this guy, you've seen this guy's face everywhere, right? He goes by Al-Shara now, but his name originally was Al-Jelani. And what Al-Jelani means, by the way, just for those wondering, Al-Jelani means of Golan, okay? And that means he's from the Golan Heights. And the Golan Heights, of course, are right here. And the Golan Heights are technically part of Syria. They're within the Syrian border, but they've been occupied by the IDF since 1967. And it's basically all Israeli settlements there. So being from the Golan Heights, he grew up pretty much like under Israeli influence, and there's a lot of speculation this guy is actually a like Israeli agent and works from Assad or something. But there's no definitive sauce one way or the other. The point is, though, is that Jelani, for the past 25 years, has been a head chopper. First, he was in Al-Qaeda, like appearing in videos chopping people's heads off, and then he was in ISIS later, appearing in videos chopping people's heads off. But he was one of the guys trying to overthrow Assad for however many years it was, 14 years, because it started in 2011. And so here you have Assad or Shara, Jelani. And I think the reason they don't want to call him Al-Jelani again is because it reminds everybody who understands what the Arabic means is that he comes from the Golan Heights, which is in Israeli territory. It's an Israeli occupied territory. It's like saying you're from, southern Israel or northern Israel. So instead they call him Shara now. Like that's a rebranding. Okay. But despite being basically installed by Netanyahu, Trump gives the credit to Erdoğan, Turkey, because as Jelani and his friends are coming into Syria back in December, as they're coming in from the south, from Iraq, the black diagonal lines are ISIS territories. The Turkish militias come in from the north, okay? And the purple are the Turkish-backed militias. Now, Trump says that these people are all actually backed by Erdoğan, that Jelani might actually be backed by Erdoğan. So maybe he's talking about Jelani. It's hard to say. But the purple here is formally like Turkish militias, Turkish proxies, etc. And the Turks and the Kurds do not get along. So they're enemies as well. There's a lot of different tribes here operating in Syria. But going back to Jelani, Jelani is at the UN yesterday, and he says they rewrote the headline here, but the headline originally was is that they're afraid of Israel, and that Israel is flying planes F-35s over southern Syria, trying to establish air dominance in an airspace. Because if you talk to Colonel Oak or you talk to General Quast, they'll tell you that in order to control the ground, you got to control the air. If you don't have air dominance, then you don't control the ground. And so they're trying to establish Israeli airspace in southern Syria so that they have total dominance on the ground and can do whatever they want on the ground. So basically what Jelani is saying is we need help. We need help from somebody to come in here and back us up and make sure that Israel doesn't just annex, half of Syria. And about a month ago, Syria signs a defense, maybe 2 months ago, Syria signs a defense agreement with, pull this up, with Turkey. This is August 14th. So this is a little over a month ago. Turkey signs military accord with Syrian government. Turkish Ministry of Defense has announced the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding with Syria for the training of Syrian troops and military consultancies. MOI signed after Damascus' request. In July, the Syrian government requested official support from Turkey to strengthen its defense capacity and combat terror groups after deadly sectarian violence erupted between government forces. Arab Sunni tribes and Druze factions in southern Syria focused around the Suwaida region. Previously, Turkey had also considered deploying troops and military aircraft at an airbase in Syria, but the Israeli Air Force targeted the base in April. And that base, I think it was Latakia. Let's check this out. And if it was Latakia, that's actually a Russian airbase. But let's run this sauce to the ground. And I appreciate everyone being here. Hit the thumbs up. I'm just going to run through all this because I think it's worth covering. They're not going to do it an afternoon. Like normally Trump brings somebody in and he does a morning pre-lunch presser in the Oval Office. They might come out and do a post-lunch event, maybe. But at 4:30, he has the Pakistani prime minister coming to the Oval Office, and they're going to have to do prep work for that beforehand. So, anything past 2 o'clock, 2:30, I doubt we're going to see anything publicly announced, but maybe we'll see. Okay, so here is the headline. This is from April 4th. It says Turkey has scoped out at least 3 air bases in Syria where it could deploy forces. Let's see. The 3 air bases were T4 and Palmyra, which is in the Homs province. Okay, that's not the province I'm looking for. It says Ankara, a longtime backer of opposition to Assad, is positioning to play a major role in the remade Syria with a possible defense pact. Okay, so another planned visit to T4 and Palmyra on March 25th was canceled because both bases were attacked. So like Turkey's like, all right, we're going to look at these air bases to send planes to, and then the airports get bombed by Israel. So there's like a proxy war happening in Syria already, but this whole year since December between Turkey and Israel, they're just not in like a direct conflict yet. Remember, if Israel attacks Turkey, Turkey is part of NATO. Article 5 gets activated and Israel finds itself at war required by law against all of Europe, Canada, and the United States. So that's why the IDF has to be very careful. And that's also why I think Turkey is the right player to come into Syria and be the deterrent. I think Russia is going to get involved at some point, but as far as being a deterrent from the IDF, like marching north and taking more ground and maybe even trying to go into Iran, Turkey is the one that makes the most sense because they're basically a shield. They can't be attacked by the IDF. Otherwise, Article 5 gets initiated. I'm just looking for what this third base is. The third base is... Here it is. Okay. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz called the strikes a warning that will not allow the security of the state of Israel to be harmed. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar accused Ankara of seeking a Turkish protectorate in Syria. Noah Lazimi, a specialist in Middle East politics at Bar Ilam University, said Israel was concerned that Turkey could establish Russian anti-aircraft systems and drones at T4. Quote, the base would enable Turkey to establish air superiority in this area, and this poses a serious concern for Israel because it undermines its operational freedom in the region. Why Israel thinks it has the right for operational freedom in a sovereign country, well, that's kind of on brand for Israel. If you haven't noticed that, I was just hoping they're going to tell us what the third base was, because I'm just wondering if the third base is Latakia, but we're not getting that answer. But where is the T4 base? So I know where Homs is. Homs is right here. Okay, Homs is a major economic. It's a major city, major economic center in Syria, and so they're saying that it's a T4 base, and it's probably these two bases right here. These are probably air bases, and that's probably what they're talking about. These are either air bases or airports, but because otherwise they'd say it was Hama. So it's probably these two bases, and then maybe the one at Hama would be my guess. But Latakia, this is the Russian air base, and that one has been attacked by drones. So that is very interesting. Yeah, and I think they said, what did they say in that? Pull that back up. They said T4, and they said Palmyra. Palmyra is over here. Okay, so it's my guess is it's probably these three. It's probably this one, and this one. Maybe this one as well. They said three of them. So there's T3. I wonder where T4 is. Anyway, so I'm just being a little autistic here. All right, just stick with me on this, because I'm going to bring this full circle to what Trump was doing the past couple of days, because this all comes back to other things that have happened. So back in, when was this Instagram thing from? This was September 7th. So this is like 3 weeks ago, basically. Trump is walking out to Marine One, and a reporter from Kazakhstan asks him a question, and he stops and he turns around, ignoring everybody else, like he wasn't answering questions, and says something. Watch this.
Mr. President, what do you think about Kazakhstan? Are you going to visit this Central Asian country? I had a great conversation with him. Say hello to him. He's a good man. Mr. President, who do you want to win today?
Okay, so if you couldn't hear it because the helicopter's in the background, he was just walking out. He wasn't answering questions, and this reporter from Kazakhstan yells out, "Mr. President, are you going to visit Kazakhstan? Like, when are you going to do something in Central Asia?" And he says, "I may. Tell him I said hello. He's a good man." And he's talking about the president of Kazakhstan. Okay, that is this guy. Tokayev, is that Tokayev? Okay, this guy. So this guy is the president of Kazakhstan, and if I pull up his Wikipedia, interesting, because Kazakhstan had like a military coup in 2021, 22. Although this guy was in office before, like in 2019. There was a weird, I need to go like nail down the exact timeline, because I'm pretty sure Putin was involved in all this, but pretty much like the family that's controlled Kazakhstan was like overthrown in 2021. This guy was president in 2019. There's like a coup that takes over the government for a few months, and then there's like a counter coup, like that whole thing is like reversed, and then the people who were in charge before get back to being in charge. So there is some kind of a purge or something that happened. Nick No is of the opinion that it was Putin that was like a benevolent cleansing or coup or whatever. But point is that this guy was in office in 2019, and then returned to office, I think, in 2022. let's see, or he becomes the chairman of the Security Council on January 5th, 2022. And so I think he holds that like simultaneously, I assume, while he's president. So maybe like a consolidation of power. Anyway, that goes back to the deal that Trump announced just a few days ago. Here's the big one is on Monday. Trump posted about the $4 billion locomotive deal. I'm sure a lot of people listening right now have seen the shows where I've talked about that. The largest railroad equipment purchase in history, according to Trump. But it's part of a bigger set of deals, a $12 billion worth of deals with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan working together. Uzbekistan is just south of Kazakhstan. Uzbekistan, $8 billion worth of Dreamliners from Boeing, 22,000 planes, which is like an insane number. It's kind of hard to believe those only cost $8 billion, but that's just the Trump touch. And then Kazakhstan getting the railroads, and all this I think ties into Putin's recent announcement from a few weeks ago that he just signed off on the largest high-speed railroad network in Europe. That's going to 2,800 miles of high-speed railroad across Russia. Okay. All that I think is like golden. That's all golden age stuff. That is pure signal for the golden age. Because we're now doing deals in Central Asia, parts of the world that we didn't really do these kind of deals with before. Uzbekistan, we have I think long had a military relationship with them, but not a very strong trade relationship as I understand it. And then here is from 2 weeks ago. Waiting for it to load. From the Straits Times, Trump says he had a good conversation with Kazakhstan's Tokayev. So there's like, I'm going back in time to show you there's little signals here. Trump puts little breadcrumbs out to tell you like something's coming. And this is why you got to pay attention to, you got to ignore all the noise, all like the fluff, and you got to focus on the stuff that lines up with the bigger picture. And so when Trump says he has a good conversation with Kazakhstan's Tokayev, this is from September 7th. This is, I think, in reference. This is published on September 8th. So I think this is in reference to that clip we just watched. It looks like he was leaving the White House to go attend the men's U.S. Open tennis or a tennis final, excuse me. But the background that this article provides is that Tokayev proposed trade talks in July after U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on Kazakh goods in August. U.S. and Kazakhstan have an enhanced strategic partnership since 2011 with 4.2 billion trade turnover in 2024. So there you go. So that's it's not a huge trade number, but it's trade. We're doing billions of dollars worth of trade. And I want to know what the enhanced strategic partnership in 2011 is. I'm not going to read through it right now. I'll get autistic on that on my own. But this is interesting because this goes back to 2011, or I'm sorry, 2017, Trump's first term, Trump's first year. And again, this just kind of signals that something important is happening in Kazakhstan. And the reason that is really important, that date, 2017, is because in 2017, you also have the Astana process. The Astana process, otherwise known as the Syrian peace process, was an initiative that started formally. It became the Astana process in 2017. It says peace talks with rebel leadership continued in Astana, Kazakhstan in 2017, organized by Vladimir Putin. And look at the date. Look at the date right here. January 16, 2017, Syria conflict. Rebels agree to attend Astana peace talks. Okay. And the Syrian rebel groups have confirmed, this is 4 days before Trump takes office the first time. Syrian rebel groups have confirmed they will attend peace talks with the government in Kazakhstan next week. The leader of Josh of Jaish al-Islam, Mohammed Aloush, said he would head the rebel delegation and aim to end the crimes of the government and its allies. The talks in Astana are being organized by Russia and Turkey, the two countries which back opposing sides in the civil war, brokered a truce on the 30th of December that has been threatened by repeated violations. Airstrikes and clashes have been reported on several battlefield fronts, and particularly the Wadi Barada region northwest of Damascus. On Sunday, sorry, I'm just getting text messages, making sure everything's okay. On Sunday, at least 9 civilians were killed by government shelling of a rebel-held village there, according to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The truce excludes the jihadist group Islamic State, so that's an important factor, and Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, known as al-Nusra Front, until it broke off formal ties with al-Qaeda in July. So al-Nusra is like the rebranded al-Qaeda, and Islamic State is ISIS. And so this meeting in Astana did not include ISIS, and it doesn't include al-Qaeda, which is important because it includes the other groups that are earnestly interested in self-governance and view the situation as their voices not being heard. And here's a breakdown of a map at the time from January 2016 showing you how Syria was carved up. And so the Islamic State is the pink. So you can see how ISIS controls most of Syria, you can see. And the dark green, like this turquoise, that's the area that Assad controls. He controls only a fraction of Syria. And it looks, somehow he wasn't overthrown. Somehow he held on. And then this purple, the purple and light purple are... The light purple are the Kurds, and the dark purple are the Syrian rebel forces, which I think that's the group we're talking about here. The purple are like the Turkish-backed Syrian rebel forces, okay? And they also fight ISIS, by the way. So the Syrian rebel forces are also fighting ISIS, and purportedly they're also fighting Assad. All the rebel groups are going. Everyone has agreed. Astana is a process to end the bloodletting by the regime and its allies. We want to end this series of crimes. An official in the Free Syrian Army, under whose banner a number of Western-backed groups fight. This is the Free Syrian Army is like the army organized by basically like the CIA and like the military to, the military to fight Assad, and then ISIS is organized obviously by the CIA. Told Reuters, the factions will go, and the first thing they will discuss will be the matter of the ceasefire and the violations by the regime. Earlier, the pro-opposition Sha'am News Network reported that several rebel groups wanted to boycott the talks because of the government's offensive in Wadi Barada. The delegation traveling to Astana will be different to the one sent to the UN-brokered peace talks in Geneva a year ago by the main umbrella group representing Syria's political and armed opposition factions, the High Negotiations Committee. Mr. Aloush quit as the HNC's chief negotiator in May, saying the Geneva talks have been a waste of time and accusing the government of intransigence. The HNC issued a statement on Saturday stressing its support for the military delegation traveling to Kazakhstan and expressing its hope that this meeting will reinforce the truce. Russia has said they will complement rather than compete with the Geneva talks. So even though like this is supposed to be happening outside of the UN and outside of the Western hegemony, I believe the UN was invited to like be an observing party, at least later. I don't know if they were invited to this first meeting, but at least later they were allowed to attend as like an observing party. President Bashar al-Assad has been quoted as telling French politicians that he is optimistic about next week's meeting and is ready for reconciliation with the rebels on the condition that they lay down their arms. The initiative by Moscow and Ankara, so that's Russia and Turkey, follows a significant defeat for the rebels in the battle for the northern city of Aleppo, which the government forces retook on December 22nd with the help of Russian airstrikes and Iranian-backed militiamen. So, read that again. So, government forces retook on December 22nd with the help of Russian airstrikes. These are Assad forces retaking control of Aleppo with the help of Russia and Iran. And meanwhile, the MSM is telling you that Iran is the one backing ISIS, that Iran is the one, organizing these militias around the Middle East that are supposed to be, anti-Israel or whatever. But it's actually Iran helping Assad try to stay in power, right? So it's all very confusing. I mean, they do tell you that Iran backs Assad, but Russia is actually, I think, the signal setter, because at some point Iran goes from being, I think, a more nefarious figure to a more benevolent entity. And, I think the killing of Soleimani, and I think it was 2020, I think that was the beginning. That was when like the real corner was turned. Although Rouhani, who was the president of Iran, was doing a lot of stuff in 2019, that including arresting the central banker, the Iranian central banker who was involved in the money laundering from Obama's Iran nuclear deal. All right, so real quick, let's just bring everyone up to speed on the very tail end of the Astana process, and then we're going to get out of here, because I don't want to step on John's toes for the Daily Herald. Hold on, I got this pulled up here. My notes. Let me pull my notes up. Astana. Okay, so the Astana process in the November timeframes, that's what we're looking at. You had, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. Astana. Maybe it's the Assad one. Okay, so here's Trump. So it says, this is October 9th, 2019. He says, let's work out a deal. Don't be a fool for invading Syria. Right. So I think this is a little bit of like kayfabe. He said, let's work out a deal. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, and I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkish economy, and I will. I've already given you a little sample with respect to Pastor Brunson. Okay. And I wonder, is Pastor Brunson the guy that he was talking about during that? I think he is. Wait a second. No, that would be really a little too perfect. He was arrested on October 2018, and he was released. Where was he released? He was released in 2018. Okay, and this is this is interesting. I didn't know this. Pastor freed in U.S. Turkey row that snared F-35 program. A Turkish-American diplomat dispute that entangled the F-35 fighter aircraft program appears at least one step closer to resolution with Turkey's release of American pastor Andrew Craig Brunson on Friday. Yeah, and so this all has to do with them getting out. It says lawmakers have made the Lockheed Martin-made F-35 a bargaining chip in the complex relationship between the two allies. The annual defense policy and appropriations bill signed into law in recent weeks, included language to delay the sales of the fighter aircraft to Turkey over Brunson's detainment and its plans to buy the S-400 system. Turkish pilots and maintainers arrived in July at the F-35 International Partner Training Program in Arizona. So they've been training on the F-35 since 2018. That's really interesting. And there's also this little sidebar. This is from this morning, or I guess it was announced a couple of days ago, but I saw it going viral this morning. The F-47 was like announced. The Boeing F-47. And what makes this really interesting is you have this annoying little thing called the qualitative military edge with Israel, where the reason that none of the Muslim countries are allowed to have the F-35 is because that's what the IDF has. And if you give them the F-35, you have to give Israel, by law, you have to give Israel something better. So, do I want Israel to have the F-47? Not really, but by law, we are required to, and until we repeal that law, that's what we are required to do. And it says, if those predictions pan out, the F-47 would have a greatly expanded range than the F-22 Raptor, whose combat radius is 590 nautical miles, and the F-35 with a combat radius of 670 miles. It would also be much faster than the F-35, whose top speed is Mach 1.6, or about 1,200 miles an hour. That is really interesting. Okay, and I saw videos of this thing out this morning, but anyway, where was I? So I was talking about Brunson, but before Brunson, I was talking about the Astana process. So I'm just gonna have to open up a new window. Okay, so in November of 2024, we had November 11th, 2024, we have this, the 22nd high-level officials meeting on Syria in the Astana format was held in Astana on the 11th and 12th of November 2024. The meeting assessed the impact of regional developments in Syria and addressed the security, humanitarian, and economic situation on the ground. A joint statement was adopted. The guarantor representatives also condemned Israeli strikes in Syria and expressed concern about the spillover from other regional conflicts. On November 27th, so 2 weeks later, you then get new fighting in Syria, throws Astana talks off track, and the fighting undermined the momentum of the Astana process. And then on December 7th, so remember, between those, like, November 11th and 12th is after Trump gets elected. Okay, and then joint statement by Qatar. So here's the joint statement from the Foreign Ministry of Qatar. But this is a joint statement put out by the state of Qatar, by the foreign ministers of all the Arab countries, and the Astana process on the situation in Syria. Doha, December 7th, the foreign ministers of a number of Arab countries met with their counterparts from the countries participating in the Astana process, which would be Russia, Iran, and Turkey, at the Sheraton Hotel in Doha to discuss the situation in Syria, especially recent developments. The meeting was attended by the foreign ministers of the state of Qatar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the Republic of Iraq from the Arab countries, the foreign ministers of the Islamic State or Islamic Republic of Iran, the Republic of Turkey, and representatives of the Russian Federation from the Astana process. So it's Russia, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. The participants stressed in a joint statement regarding the recent events in Syria that the continuation of the Syrian crisis constitutes a dangerous development, etc. Let's jump down to the important part. The attendees stressed the importance of to continue close consultation and coordination among them in order to contribute effectively to finding a peaceful solution in the Syrian crisis. At the end of the meeting, the attendees listened to a briefing from the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, and affirmed their support for the UN efforts to reach a political solution. It says put an end to the bloodshed, the shedding of innocence, defenseless blood, and prolonging the crisis, to preserve the unity, sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Syria, and to protect it from slipping into chaos and terrorism, and to ensure voluntary return of refugees and displaced and all displaced areas. Now, that is like the same day that that the overthrow begins in Assad. Here is the Astana parties holding the extraordinary meeting in Doha. Here's the picture of all the guys in the room. This comes at a time when the HTS and mercenaries affiliated with the Turkish occupation state are launching attacks on the Damascus government forces amid their collapse and withdrawal from several important Syrian cities, such as Aleppo, Hama, Daraa, and Soweda. This marks the collapse of the agreements made by the parties involved in the Astana process. So, oh no, the sky is falling. We have failed. And then here is Iran a week before, marking that its differences of opinion of what should happen with Syria. It says Iranian-backed Iraqi militias. So this is Iran and Iraq working together. Remember, Iran and Iraq are like historic enemies. Deployed in northern Syria to help defend Assad against the Syrian opposition forces. Hezbollah does not appear willing to commit fighters because of its losses in Lebanon to Israel. It is not clear that Hezbollah can continue to support Assad on its own. Iran is coordinating with Syria and Russia to counter the rebel offensive. Iran and Turkey continue to hold different desired political goals in Syria, which could cause increased friction as the Syrian opposition continues. Syrian forces appear to be slowing their advance into regime-controlled areas of northwest Syria. And then they're talking about like counteroffensives. And then the fighting was designed apparently to throw off the Astana process. So again, I'm looking. There was a specific article from the RT that I was looking for that I don't have handy. But point is that I think that all of this was happening. Like they were meeting. These guys were meeting and talking like daily, and then they were meeting in person right as like Assad gets overthrown. I think that they made the decision to pull back. This is like the Germans are coming at the Russian line in World War II at Kursk. They can see the tanks coming. They know Blitzkrieg is happening. And instead of like pinning down and digging in and trying to fight them, they fall back. They let the Blitzkrieg come in, and then they circle back around to envelop them in a double envelopment, which is, to surround them, which is the shoulder Russian maneuver defense, Russian shoulder defense. It's how they won the Battle of Kursk. That's what I think has happened here. And I think that Kazakhstan is a key part of all this. Anyway, hit the thumbs up. We're going to get out of here for John. I'm going to raid y'all over to the Badlands Daily Herald. And if anything happens, we'll maybe try to jump on later if something happens with Erdoğan. But yeah, let's keep an eye on that. I'm hoping for an F-16, an announcement that we're sending them F-16s, and then I'm hoping that for an announcement that F-35s are coming their way, but that's probably not going to happen for a while, like the delivery. But the head game of like signaling to Netanyahu, hey, we're sending F-35s to Turkey, that's going to cause Netanyahu to blow a gasket right before he's about to address the UN. So we got to keep an eye on that. And here is the raid, and I'm going to say goodbye here. Later, guys. And I got to do an ad real quick. 1 second. I don't think I have an ad uploaded, Jessica. But yeah, I do.
Deodorant should do more than cover you up. It should protect you all day long.
Dude, the deodorant stick is legit. I like the mint one. And, you go work out and you kind of get like, you get funky if you work out. Dude, like at the end of my workout, like I'm sweating, shirt got all those sweat. Like I'm like, dude, I still smell good. Like I absolutely love it. If you guys haven't tried it, try it.
That's the difference with Soft Disclosure. No aluminum, no chemicals, Just clean, natural ingredients that fight odor and keep you fresh through every workout, every meeting, every moment.
I've always struggled with the like, you can't use aluminum deodorant because you're going to die if you use it kind of thing, because all of the non-aluminum deodorant products suck pretty much. This is different. This is all day. You're all day good, and you're not putting any of that disgusting chemicals right near your lymph nodes.
Soft Disclosure deodorant, real protection, real freshness, built on truth. Available in mint and lemon grapefruit. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.